So I created this graphic and posted it on my YouTube community page. Some of you guys might have caught it. It just shows the 276 sign basic dimensions. This was the sign that occurred on December 27th to 28th, 2023. So you've got the sun at 276 degrees in Sagittarius, or the ninth constellation. And then you've got the moon at 108 degrees in the third constellation, or Gemini, otherwise known as Castor and Pollux. And then you've got Aries. Oh, you got Jupiter at 35 degrees in the first constellation, or Aries. And take note that the Aries constellation, which would be up here, that's about 40 degrees off center from like the ecliptic 12 o'clock position, which makes sense because Aries is the Lamb, is Jesus, is the door, is represented by number 4. He's the middle candle, or the fourth candle on the 7 candle menorah. So it makes sense that it would be 40 degrees off center. And between the sun and the moon, there are 192 degrees or 168 degrees, depending on which side of the ecliptic you go around. So those are like the basic dimensions. There are other features that I won't get into, but those are like the big important things. 384 degrees is also a number that's important to keep in mind because it's if you add the position of the sun at 276 degrees to the position of the moon at 108 degrees, you get the 384 degrees. And that shows up a lot in like the numerical analysis of this, and when you go into the numerics. So anyway, this is the view in Stellarium, which is the astronomy software I use. So you can see it's pretty close to what I had there. You've got the same thing going on. This is the Gemini constellation right here, and you got the moon, and then down here Sagittarius, you got the sun, and up here you got Aries, and just pretty much to the right of its front legs you've got Jupiter right there at 35 degrees. And yeah, this was taken at early morning, I guess was at December 28th. I don't remember where this is. This is probably Jerusalem time zone when I took the screenshot. All right. So let's get started. I just want to first show some quick number stuff that I found after I made my last video, which I thought was pretty cool. And this pertains to the sign. So I noticed with the dates, they're all pointing to the sign. I mean, the dates themselves, the Gregorian dates. So if you look at, I've got it here on my Twitter post, but I'll just reproduce it on the right side here, which has a bigger font. So you've got the date 12/27/23. So that was one of the dates. So that's the date when the sign first manifested, late in the evening. Now, if you do a simple multiplication of that date, so if you do the 1 times 2 times 2 times 7 times 2 times 3, it gives you 168 degrees, just like I showed. That's the 168 degrees around the ecliptic from the position of the sun to the position of the moon. Now, if you take the next date, which is 12/28, and do the same thing, 1 times 2 times 2 times 8 times 2 times 3, you get 192 for the 192 degrees, which is the difference between the sun and the moon positions on the other side of the ecliptic, just like I had showed. And if you write out the year, instead of 23, you do the full 2023, and you do the product of multiplication. 1 times 2 times 2 times 8 times 2 times 2 times 3, you get 384, which is the 384 degrees that you get when you sum the 276 degrees with the 108 degrees of the moon position. So this is obviously amazing. I was pretty astonished when I saw this. What a proof. I mean, can there be any doubt left? Let's see. And then there's a couple other things I wanted to show. regarding that date, so if you just go and do a simple gematria on English and you type in 27th of December, 27th of December in simple ordinal just happens to equal 276. The 276 degrees of the position of the sun, and the 27th of December is when this sign manifested. So, just behold the awesome power and sovereignty of God. I mean, he's sovereign over everything, over the English language, all the numbers used, the calendar dates, Gentile and Jew calendar, whether they're wrong or right, or people think they're twisted or wrong or they're corrupted, he's sovereign over it all. So just stand in awe of the amazing connections that you can find. I mean, and then if you take this date 1227 and you subtract it, so if you reverse it, so because 1227 reversed would be 7221, and then you subtract 1227 from it, you get 5994, which is the current year, Anno Mundi. In reality, it's Anno Fall, but most people are more familiar with Anno Mundi and have no idea what Anno Fall is, so I'm just going to say Anno Mundi. But anytime I say Anno Mundi, I'm probably referring to Anno Fall, year of the fall. Let's see. And then the sign numerically is represented by, you can do it by like 39 because it's the third and ninth constellations that represents the sign, or variations of that like 93 or 393, for instance. One of the strongest numerical representations of that sign is 139 because it's the first constellation, third constellation, ninth constellation. And I realized that why this sign is defined in Acts 27 and 28, because Acts 27 and 28 can be defined by 278. It can be defined by 2728, or it can be defined by 278. But if you do 139 plus 139 equals 278. So this is how the Bible is woven together. It's all done by, numbers. So that's why you have this sign, which is most aptly defined by the number 139, defined in chapters 27 and 28, which is 278, because 139 plus 139 equals 278. And then why does it happen on, why did it occur on December 27th going into the 28th, which is, it's like, 1227 to 28. Now, if you compress that down to a number, because remember in numerics you can drop zeros, you can compress repeating digits, you would get like 1278. Okay, that would be like probably the sanest numerical representation of that date, or those two dates rather. So if you add 139 plus 1139, it equals 1278. So that's why God chose that Gentile calendar date to dates, I should say, to be the dates that this sign manifests on. Other cool things is if you take 139 and you add it to 784, which represents 5784, the current Jewish year, current official Jewish year, it equals 923. That implies ninth constellation to third constellation, because that's when the sign happens in the year 5784. If you were like, God hides a lot of things by reversing numbers or rotating them. So if you take the 278, which is referring to Acts 27 to 28, but you reverse it and you have 872, and then you add 784 to that, you get 1656, which anybody who knows anything about the book of Genesis and the dates involved knows that that's the date in Anno Mundi when the flood started. Okay, and we're at the cusp of the beginning of the next great judgment. So the first was by water, the second will be by fire, but in this case we'll have a period of great tribulation beforehand. Another thing that I found was if you take these the like coordinate, I don't know what's the word for it, degrees, I guess, whatever, degrees of, oops, I'm still getting used to how to enter like a degrees character. Okay, that's how you do it. Okay, if you take the degrees of the primary participants in this sign, so you had Saturn at 35 degrees, and then you divide it by you divide like each one by the constellation that they were in. So that was like the first constellation, and then you have the 108 degrees divided by the third constellation, which is where it was. That's the moon, right? And then you have the 276 degrees, which was the sun. Whoops. 276. And the sun was in the ninth constellation, Sagittarius. Okay, each of these is going to give a result. This first one is going to be obviously 35. Second one is 36. And the third one is 30.666. And if you sum those together, the sum is equal to 101.666. Which, as if you watch my last video, you know that 101 is a reference to the binary door. In other words, is a reference to the rapture. And then 666, we should know, is a reference to the Antichrist and the Beast Kingdom. So the sign, if you add it together this way, it's basically telling you rapture followed by Antichrist, right? The rapture door to heaven followed by the Antichrist. One final thing I'll mention before we get into some of the rapture date stuff. I mentioned in the last video that I couldn't find a place where in Acts 27 and 28 where there was any sort of mention or even like implied hint of the aspect of the sign where Jupiter is at 35 degrees in Aries. But I think I did find it in the last couple of days, because if you go to let me go to Acts 27 verse 28. Hey, that's Acts 27:28. Strangely enough, it says, so this is where they're trying to gauge the depth of the water as they're approaching Malta. And they said that they sounded and it found 20 fathoms, and they went a little further, sounded again, and it found it 15 fathoms. So 20 plus 15 is 35, right? So I think that is the answer to how is Jupiter at 35 degrees mentioned in Acts 27 and 28. There you go. You got your 20 plus 35 gives you 35 degrees. Okay. Now let's take a look at where we are on the calendar and with respect to the rapture date. So on January 19th, which was one of the days that we were thinking, I guess it would have been like the 8th day of Hanukkah. We were thinking that might have been that we thought that was a high watch date. I got a verse of the day pop up on my phone because, like a lot of us, we have Bible apps and it gives us the verse of the day. And it was 1 Kings, got a little photo of it here. It was 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 56. What does it say here? So I I was thinking it looks a lot like First King. It's very, very close, suspiciously close to First Kings 8, verse 65, right? Because it's just the 56 is backwards. And I thought, well, that is a pretty crazy coincidence. I mean, that is pretty darn close to what we were saying about what's described in 1 Kings 8:65, which is where Solomon holds the dedication and then he extends it like by 7 days. So there's like a 14-day, ultimately it's a 14-day festival. So I took that as a very strong hint from God that maybe that's when that's in play here, right? And we had already suspected that. Like in the last video, I had mentioned that as a possibility. That's why I had those other dates in red, the day 14 and quote unquote 15 of Hanukkah. But since then, we have a better idea of what that meant, because I really only looked at that in passing the first time, and I've been working with some brothers on Twitter, Brother Jordan and Brother G44, and they just really helped me out a lot, helped me understand this stuff, because I don't really know that much about the dedication and tabernacle stuff. So anyway, I guess I'll show you those verses. We'll read them. This is 1 Kings chapter 8. Okay, so we've got chapter 8, verse 65. And at that time Solomon held a feast, and all Israel with him, a great congregation, from the entering in of Hamath unto the river of Egypt, before the Lord our God, 7 days and 7 days. Yeah, 7 days and 7 days, even 14 days. I'm going to turn off the Strong's numbers here. That's hard to read. And then 866 says, on the 8th day he sent the people away, and they blessed the king, and went unto their tents joyful and glad of heart for all the goodness that the Lord had done for David his servant and for Israel his people. Now, if you go to 2 Chronicles chapter 7, it's pretty much describing the same thing. And this is verses 8. Well, there you go. Look at that. You've got a 278 right there. 2 Chronicles chapter 7, verse 8. Just like mirroring the Acts chapters 27 to 28. Anyway, so verse 8 says, also at the same time Solomon kept the feast 7 days, and all Israel with him, a very great congregation, from the entering in of the Hamath unto the river of Egypt. And in the 8th day they made a solemn assembly, for they kept the dedication of the altar 7 days, and the feast 7 days. Okay, so what it's saying here is that when Solomon was having this festival here that consisted of, like, the first part of it was basically like, well, he was having this festival that was basically dedicating the temple. And the first part of it was the dedication, the first 7 days, and then the second 7 days was, quote unquote, the feast. So I guess that's the Feast of Tabernacles, otherwise known as Sukkot. Now, remember what I said in the last video, what Brother G44 was explaining to me was that tabernacles could not be celebrated at the proper time because the temple hadn't been cleansed yet. And he argued that the temple was cleansed when Michael the Archangel, as the planet Mars, touched the sanctuary on January 11th, which was Kislev 24. I'll show that to you fast. So this was January 11th when Mars came in here and touched that little line. And remember this these constellation lines on the upper part of the Sagittarius constellation, they're a ship in the context of the symbolism of the Acts 27-28 ship narrative, but they're also a tabernacle or a sanctuary, okay? Because the lines also resemble a tent. So remember, the sun at the 276 sign was right there at the top where Mars is now, and then it's moved on in the last 2 weeks. But after those 2 weeks, on Kislev 24, Mars touched that line, which was the cleansing of the sanctuary. Now remember, this happened exactly on the same day, which was 2,300 days after the Revelation 12 sign. And if you look at, if you remember, I went over this in the last video, but Daniel chapter 8, he says, in chapter 8, verse 14, after 2,300 days, the sanctuary shall be cleansed. Okay? So, yeah, that's what happened there. And that's also when United States and Great Britain attacked Yemen, like the Houthi rebels in Yemen. Like, actually, if you, I went and looked at the exact time, like in that time zone, it was like 2:30 a.m. on the 12th. So very, very early morning on the 12th of January is when they launched the attack. Like, you can find that on Wikipedia. And that's like almost exactly, like within like 15 minutes or something of when the planet Mars hit that that little line in that time zone. So it's obviously they're paying attention to these things as well. So anyway, that being said, so like I said, 1 Kings chapter 8 verse 65 and 66, and then that other blurb in 2 Chronicles chapter 7, 8, and 9, they're talking about this festival that lasts 14 days basically, okay? Because it's like a combination of dedication and Sukkot. Now, having said that, I created I modified the calendar a little bit that I was using. I gotta find it real fast. Hang on. Okay, so here we go. Let me just zoom this out. Zoom this, yeah, like that. Okay. So yeah, this calendar has the official Jewish calendar dates on the left, and then the Gentile Gregorian calendar dates, and then this like Enochian solar calendar dates, which I went into in the last video. If you want to know how I'm coming up with these dates, just watch that one. But as we pointed out, there was a lot of evidence to suggest that January 11th was actually Kislev 24, which was mentioned in Haggai chapter 2, where the word of the Lord came to Haggai, and he said that he would shake the heavens and the earth on Kislev 24. Well, and also we showed that how Kislev 24 seems to be anchored to or connected to the 276 sign that occurred on December 27th going into the 28th. It's like 14 days later, and December and Acts 27 mentions like a 14-day tarrying period. So I think that's how it connects to that. And so from that point, like the next day started Hanukkah, and we showed a bunch of information, especially in the dates, how the dates had this like mirror effect from the from like the Gregorian calendar to the official Jewish calendar. So that really also reinforced this. It's more just suggestive evidence that was in fact Hanukkah. Like these dates are actually Hanukkah, the true Hanukkah. Anyway, so if that was the 24th of Kislev, the next day is the 25th, which would have been the first day of Hanukkah. And so then you have, let's see, first day, second day, third day, fourth day, fifth day, sixth day, seventh day of Hanukkah, and then as First Kings and Second Chronicles explained, after that 7-day dedication, and remember Hanukkah means dedication. That's what the word actually means. You start the feast, and the feast they're referring to is the Feast of Tabernacles, otherwise known as Sukkot. Let me expand this a little bit, slightly. So that began on this Enochian calendar date. That began on Tevet 1, first day of Sukkot. And this is like this delayed Sukkot because the sanctuary wasn't cleansed until Kislev 24, January 11th, like I just explained. That's our theory anyway. So I guess that's the first day of Sukkot, second day, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. And then the seventh day of Sukkot is going to be January 25th. That's also Tevet 7, or the 7th day of the 10th month. And then the 8th day, which is a great 8th day. I think that's referred to in 2 Kings 8:66. I think they say, like, all the people went away happy, paraphrasing there, on the 8th day. And this is like, keep in mind, this is like the 15th day of this entire festival that started at Kislev 25. So that's a great 8th day. Shemini Atzeret, that's on January 26th, which is Tevet 10, or the 8th day of the 10th month. And then the Jewish official calendar dates would be Shabbat 15 and Shabbat 16. Now, concerning these dates, the first thing that comes to mind, this is something that Brother G44 pointed out, is that let me close this real fast, the dates of the January 25th and January 26th which are written like this, obviously, resemble Revelation 12:5 and 12:6. Man-child caught up in 12:5. Tribulation begins in 12:6. Other thing I noticed was that, okay, so the other date was Tevet 7 and 8. It was the 10th month and the and the 7th and 8th days. So it's like written like 10:8 and 10:7. And those numbers look familiar to me. And then I remembered that when I was looking at the sign, I noticed that, let me just try to pull it up. So the sign is defined when the sun reaches 276 degrees of longitude. And at that moment, the moon is at 108 degrees. But that's not the whole story. That's what it's like over here in the western part, like, so, the Americas. But in the eastern part of the earth, okay, so Jerusalem and eastwards, Asia and so forth, it was the moon was, when the sun reached 276 degrees, the moon was actually at 107 degrees, but only for like an hour and a half or so, or an hour and 15 minutes before it reached the 108 degree point. And so you've got there manifest in this sign, you've got 107 and 108, 107 and 108, which is just like the dates here involved. Let me put that in the right order. 10th month, 7th day, 10th month, 8th day. The two dates that we're looking at here, January 25th and 26th. Tevet 7 and Tevet 8. So, I mean, I'm not saying those that they're definitely the rapture date, but that's a pretty cool connection if they were the rapture date, that those dates are baked into the sign in that way. Okay, so now about this period of time. So you've got like from the 276 sign, which was on December 27th going in the 28th, which is right here. You've got two periods of 14, okay? Because it's like, this is the, date of the sign here, Kislev 10, or December 28th, and then you go first day, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, and then the 14th day you're at January 11th, Kislev 24. So that's like the first period of Terry, okay, the Terry period. And it explicitly mentions, if you recall, a 14-day Terry period in Acts 27. I believe it's Acts 27 verse 33. But then we've got this from Kislev 24. You've got this extended feast which lasts 14 days. So you've got like another 14 days there. So you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, which takes you to the last day of this extended feast. Okay, January 25th, or Tevet 7. And so That said, let's take a look at some hints that where you have like a double 14. Okay, so the first one I think I mentioned in previous videos, but I'll just go over it again. The first one is right there in Acts 27 again. Acts 27 actually mentions 14 twice, and kind of conspicuously. I don't think it was an accident. I think it's a hint. So you've got Acts 27 verse 27. Okay, you got when the 14th night was come. That's the first time. And then the second one is verse 33. We're talking about the 14th day. So you've got this conspicuous double mention of 14. And we already established that this sign, which is defined in Acts 27 and 28, is this point, which is, from which this 14-day period of Terry is connected to. So, yeah, you've got 14 mentioned twice, and then you've got exactly two 14s connecting the 276 sign to the 7th day, or the 14th day of this extended festival period that began on Kislev 24. Isn't that interesting? And then there's another one. So we got to go right back to Haggai chapter 2. And this one was pointed out to me by Brother G44. Okay, so the word of the Lord comes to Haggai. So the word of the Lord that's about the 24th day of the 9th month starts at Haggai chapter 2 verses 10, and it goes for 14 verses, okay? Because the first part of it, it's like the 21st day of the month or something like that. The 21st day of the 7th month. But specifically the section of this chapter that deals with this word of the Lord that's coming to Haggai on the 4 and 20th day of the 9th month, the 24th day of the 9th month, it's in these 14 verses of verses 10 through 23, okay? So you got 14 there. And then for some reason in that prophecy, it says that the word of the Lord came unto Haggai on the 24th day of the 9th month twice. Okay, that's stated twice. It's stated in verses 10 and again in 20. So you've got, again, this 14 times 2 thing going here, which I think is another hint to this period of time from the 276 sign of 14 plus 14. You got the 14 to get the Kislev 24, and then you got the extended feast of 14 days. So, oh yeah, and there's another cool thing that Brother G44 showed me, and this is in the wording of when they mention that extended feast in 2 Kings chapter 8, going to, 1 Kings chapter 8. At that time Solomon held a feast, and all Israel with him. This is verse 65, by the way. A great congregation from the entering in of Hamath unto the river of Egypt before the Lord our God, 7 days and 7 days. Okay, 14 days. And so it's mentioning this location here. Okay, that's what this part is. But that word Hamath looks and sounds suspiciously very close to Hamas. And I don't know if you guys remember, but that word Hamas in Hebrew means violence. Hamas, Strong's 2555, means violence. Okay, so if you look at it like that, so if you look at it like, instead of this describing location, but it's describing an event that's happening in time, and then from meaning like from that point. So it's like from the entering in of violence into the river of Egypt. So then if you look at like that to mean like, let's see here, because if you look at Egypt, the Red Sea kind of looks like the river of Egypt, or if you want to argue, maybe you can say like Suez Canal would be the river of Egypt, and the Red Sea kind of goes into that. either way, it's just kind of not. This isn't, this isn't science here. This is innuendo. Okay, this is God's innuendo. So from the entering in of violence into the river of Egypt, or from the entering in of violence into the Red Sea. Right? So he's saying at that time Solomon held a feast. So in other words, this extended feast began from the entrance of violence into the Red Sea. Isn't that interesting, right? Because that's exactly, remember, like I said, January 11th is exactly when Great Britain and USA attacked Yemen. So that's the quote unquote entering in of violence into the Red Sea. That's when, if you accept that innuendo as a type of hint, then he's saying that the extended feast started then, and that's exactly what we're saying according to our calendar, because this is when the attack happened, and that's when, and then we start the extended feast the next day. That's day one of dedication, the dedication week of Hanukkah, the Hanukkah week, right? And then you've got another 7 days taking to the last day, the 14th day. So what a cool little hint that is. And January 25th to the 26th is also the full moon. And if you remember Proverbs 7:20 and Psalms 81:3, they both refer to Jesus returning at the appointed time. But appointed time there is actually the Strong's Hebrew 3677, Kesa. And many believe that should be correctly translated as full moon. Let me just pull that up real fast. Proverbs 7:20. He hath taken a bag of money with him and will come home at the day appointed. So it really should say at the full moon. The same thing with Psalms 81:3. Blow up the trumpet in the new moon, in the full moon, on our solemn feast day. Interesting side fact: if you take those two verses are the only places in the entire Bible where this word is actually used. It's only used twice. And if you add up the chapter verse numbers of those, so you take 8:13 plus Proverbs 7:20, which is 720, you get 1533. So you get a little 153 there. So anyway, that's the full moon coming up, and this month's full moon, as I mentioned in the last video, is also known as a wolf moon, or a wolf full moon, or something like that. And also in the last video, I mentioned in that context that that howl is mentioned for when the day of the Lord starts, for when the tribulation starts, right? So if you look at Isaiah 13:16, it says, 13:6, it says, "Howl ye, for the day of the Lord is at hand; it shall come as a destruction from the Almighty." And yeah, is that another little hint that the tribulation starts on a wolf full moon? I looked up more instances of howl in the Bible since our last video, and the word howl occurs exactly 29 times in the King James Bible. And isn't it interesting that from that 276 sign to January 26th, it's exactly 29 days. Anyway, so if you look at you look at a small sampling of verses with howl in it, it's usually or I shouldn't say usually, it's often in the context of something to do with the tribulation. So if you look at, say, Isaiah 15:3, that's a 153 again. So in their streets they shall gird themselves with sackcloth, on the tops of their houses and in their streets everyone shall howl, weeping abundantly. And then if you look at Isaiah 23:1, and I think this whole chapter has to do with the initial destruction on Babylon that occurs right at the beginning of the Great Tribulation, right at the beginning of the tribulation. So 21 verse 1, right away it says, "The burden of Tyre," and I believe that Tyre represents New York City for a bunch of reasons that I won't get into. So it says, the burden of Tyre, howl, ye ships of Tarshish, for it is laid waste, so that there is no house, no entering in. From the land of Chittim it is revealed to them. And then in verse 6, pass ye over to Tarshish, howl ye inhabitants of the isle. The isle there, in my opinion, referring to Manhattan, island of Manhattan in New York City. And verse 14, howl ye ships of Tarshish, for your strength is laid waste. So a lot of the initial destruction, I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent, but a lot of the initial destruction of the first wave of the tribulation is a mega tsunami, which the enemy has been signaling so hard. If you follow me on Twitter, you know I talk about it a lot. But they're planning on unleashing at least one mega tsunami. It'll be man-made on for sure the east coast of the USA and possibly also the west coast. And this is actually talked about in Psalm 124. There was a book written by, I forget the name of the author, but a lot of you are probably familiar with it. It's Prophecies in the Psalms, and it was written actually back in the 80s or 90s, where this guy discovered a pattern where a lot of the 20th century events can be found in the Psalms, like matching the Psalm number. So, like for instance, if something happened in 1913, it would be in Psalm 13, and so that's why I say Psalm 124 describes events in 2024. Now, like I said, he wrote the book in the 80s, but there's been a lot of like stuff that confirms it since then. Like if you look at Psalm 120, which we know what happened in 2020, right? And so what's like the first or the second verse here? Deliver my soul, O Lord, from lying lips and a deceitful tongue. So it's referring to the fake pandemic. So anyway, if you look at 124, it's talking about if it had not been the Lord who was on our side when men rose up against us, then they had swallowed us up quick when their wrath was kindled against us. The waters had overwhelmed us, the stream had gone over our soul, then the proud waters had gone over our soul. So this flooding imagery, which corresponds perfectly to a mega tsunami scenario that inundates the East Coast, at least the East Coast, probably other places too. Blessed be the Lord, who hath not given us as a prey to their teeth. Our soul is escaped as a bird out of the snare of the fowlers. The snare is broken, and we are escaped. So there you got your rapture wording or imagery there, because that's the same. I guess the same sort of rhetorical imagery, you can say, that's used in the book of Luke. I think it was Luke chapter 21, where it says, "For as a snare shall it come on all them that dwell on the face of the whole earth." So it's likening the tribulation period to a snare. So here, where it's saying that our soul is escaped as a bird out of the snare of the fowlers, it's saying that we escaped the tribulation. So it's a rapture reference. Okay, so another instance of howl that I found noteworthy was in Zechariah chapter 11, verse 2. Howl, fir tree, howl, fir tree, for the cedar is fallen, because the mighty are spoiled. Howl, O ye oaks of Bashan, for the forest of the vintage is come down. So, yeah, that brings us into the next thing I want to talk about. The date of January 25th happens to be Tu B'Shavat, the New Year of Trees, or the Feast of Trees. And this howl verse right here, Zechariah 11:2, which, by the way, that's the verse in Genesis. Genesis 1:12 is the verse where trees are created in the creation account. But that's a side note. So this verse, Zechariah 11:2, is combining the wolf full moon with the Feast of Trees. So maybe that's another hint. But yeah, so that's the other thing I wanted to mention. That is that's the New Year of Trees, Feast of Trees, or whatever it's called. I don't really know much about it, but there is a really good hint that Brother G44 pointed out to me, also in Haggai 2, remarkably. Let me pull up Haggai real fast. No, it's the preceding chapter, preceding book. So, Haggai chapter 2, verse 19. It says, "Is the seed yet in the barn? Yea, as yet the vine, and the fig tree, and the pomegranate, and the olive tree hath not brought forth. From this day I will bless you." So, yeah, wow. Isn't it amazing? That seems like a strong hint for the, referring to the Feast of Trees, or the New Year of Trees. And isn't it amazing that there are all these hints that are packed into Haggai chapter 2, just in these few verses? I mean, for example, in verses 12 and 13, it's talking about being unclean by a dead body, which implies the 7-day cleansing period of Leviticus. And this is a couple verses after it mentions the 24th day of the 9th month, which, as we said, was the point where the day when the sanctuary is cleansed by Michael the Archangel as the planet Mercury. So there's just there's just so much stuff packed into this one prophecy to Haggai. Anyway, so let me move on here and get into some numeric stuff. So there's a lot of cool stuff I found, and I want to show you guys. All right, so I guess the first thing, okay, about this date also. This is kind of a minor thing, but I just thought I'd mention it. So this is January 25th. Sorry, 125. And that's 2024. So that equals, by reduction, reduces to, or just by summation, it's an 8. That's 5 plus 2 plus 1 is 8. And then this is also an 8, because 2 plus 2 plus 4 is 8. So you've got your 88. And it's like, what do they say in Back to the Future? When this baby hits 88 miles per hour, you're going to see some serious doo-doo. So there's that. And let's see, I already mentioned that. So let me set this up here. So the first thing you have to know is that, so like we talked about, Hanukkah in Hebrew had the gematria of 83 and 38. Now, since we're talking about Sukkot, remember Sukkot means tabernacles, we're going to look at the numbers 31 and 13. So if you look at Sukkot in Hebrew, the standard, ordinal, and reduced values for Sukkot are 85, 31, and 13. Pretty much just going to ignore the 85, because I think this symmetry here of the 31 and 13 is God's way of sort of trying to draw our attention to it. So I thought maybe we should focus on it, on those numbers more. So if you want to like look at Sukkot, like the 8th day of Sukkot, then you want to be looking at something like 13:8, right? Because Sukkot is 13, and then 8 means 8th day, so you would be looking at the number 138. And then if you want to look at there are 4 variations of that, right? Because you've got the 31 or the 13, and then you could put the 8 on the beginning or the end of the number. So you can do 13:8, or you can do 3:18, because that's the 31 and the 8. So Sukkot 8th day. And then you can do 8:13, 8th day of 13, 8th day of Sukkot. Or you can do 8:31. This is 8th day of 31, which is the ordinal value. So yeah, those are the numerical variations if you're trying to represent 8th day of Sukkot numerically. One interesting thing is if you take the 3:18 here, 3:18 like the 318th prime number is 2111. And that should stand out immediately because of John 21:11, which is the verse that talks about the 153 fish. So that's we can we can say maybe that means that the 153 fish will be caught on the third day, or the 8th day of Sukkot, great 8th day, Shemini Atzeret. You could make that argument, but let's continue. So another thing is, like we were looking at that full moon verse of Psalm 81:3. That's just this one right here, right? Because you can take that apart and make that an 8:1:3, which is 8 and 13, 8th day of Sukkot. So I thought that was very cool, and I looked, if you remember last time, on the last video, because I kept seeing Yemen in the news, and I thought that sounded a lot like ye men, which is a phrase stated fairly often, I guess, in the Bible, like ye men of Galilee. And I discovered that it has 13 occurrences in the entire Bible. So you have, I guess, well, let me just put that out there. So ye men, 13 occurrences. And now we know that could be a hint at Sukkot, because Sukkot is equal to 13. And not only 13 occurrences giving us a clue to Sukkot, but if you remember from the last video, all of the occurrences in the New Testament, of the 13, there are 8 of them in the New Testament, and all of those 8 actually happen to be in the book of Acts. So first of all, isn't it amazing that we have this hint pointing at Yemen that happens to point so strongly also to the book of Acts? And what's going on with Yemen has to do with ships or shipping, and Acts has this ship narrative. But anyway, so you have the eight instances of the 13, or the 8 occurrences out of the 13 of this phrase ye men, okay, happen to be in the book of Acts, or happen to be in the New Testament, however you want to look at it. So again, we have an 8 and a 13. So that also is pointing to 8th day of Sukkot. So it's not just pointing at Sukkot, it's pointing specifically, if you break down like the division of the occurrences between the Old and New Testament, it's pointing to the 8th day of Sukkot. Let's take another look at the Feast of Trees, or the New Year for Trees, from a numerical perspective. Now, the word tree is found in 119 chapters in the Bible. It occurs in 119 chapters of the Bible, I should say. And then trees, plural form of that, occurs in 88 chapters. Those are interesting numbers there. So if you just sum them, well, first of all, right off the bat, that 119 plus 88 looks very suspiciously similar to the 119 plus 888, which is the number of verses in the book of Acts. But let's leave that aside for the moment. 119 plus 88 is equal to 207, which is a number you might not be aware, but has a relationship to 153, because if you take 207 degrees, you get 153 degrees left. In other words, 207 plus 153 equals 360. So there's that, but that's not really what I wanted to show. What I wanted to show was 119, because there's this relationship. You've got tree in 119 chapters, and you've got trees in 88 chapters, okay? And so if you take the 119 minus 88, you get 31, which is Sukkot. So let's put this all together. We've got this kind of 31, which represents Sukkot, hiding in the numbers of the number of occurrences of tree or trees in the King James Version. And that suggests a relationship between the Feast of Trees and Sukkot. And really, there shouldn't be any relationship between the two, except on this calendar that we're using, this Enochian calendar, which we found a lot of evidence supporting the notion that Kislev 24 was actually January 11th. And starting this, 1 Kings chapter 8 extended dedication feast from that point happens to make the Feast of Trees coincide with the 7th day of Sukkot. So what this calendar is saying is kind of like what the numbers are saying here, suggesting this relationship that was always there hiding, but now we know what it means, because now we understand the calendar better. Okay. I wanted to also mention how we know, I guess, from a numerical perspective, how do we know that this Terry period, or this period of Terry, happens to be connected or linked to the 276 sign? Well, the most, if not the most, definitely one of the most well-known tarrying verses in the Bible is Habakkuk 2:3. Obvious 2023 reference there. Let's just go through it real fast. Habakkuk 2:3. Whoops, that's Haggai. Habakkuk. For the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it shall speak and not lie. Though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come, it will not tarry. We've all heard it before. Now, this is how we know that tarrying, because that's talking about tarrying, and that's like the most well-known tarrying verse. And this is how we know that the 276 sign of December 27th going into the 28th is the point from which we should be calculating all this tarrying stuff, okay? Habakkuk 2:3 happens to be the 393rd verse of from the end of the Old Testament. Not an accident. Third constellation to the 9th constellation. On top of that, if you look at the Hebrew gematria value of that verse, so in Hebrew Standard, that verse equals 1637. And the 1637th prime number is 13931, which is either a framed 393 like that, or you can look at it like a 139 going in both directions, like going from left to right and right to left, Hebrew style. So that's pointing again at the 1st, 3rd, and 9th constellations of the 276 sign. Another thing is if you want to add up all the times that Jesus tarries in the Bible. So this one, it's not that easy. You actually have to go and read the verses, but Jesus actually tarries in 5 verses. Okay, so Jesus tarrying. He tarries in Matthew 25:5, Luke 2:43, Luke 24:29, John 3:22, and John 4:40. And if you add up all of those verse numbers, it equals 139. So we're talking about tarrying here. We're talking about Jesus, right? So all this stuff, having to do with tarrying, whether the most famous tarrying verse in Scripture or all the instances of Jesus tarrying, all seem to be pointing to this, 39 or 393 or 139. So that's how we know from a numeric standpoint that the tarrying period is anchored to that 276 sign event. Now check this out. This is pretty cool. If you take 139 and you subtract. Now remember, Sukkot in Hebrew gematria is 31 in ordinal and 13 in reduced. So if you take it 139 and subtract 31, which is the ordinal value, you get 108, and that corresponds to 8th day of the 10th month, or Tevet 8. If you then take the 139, instead of subtracting the ordinal, you subtract the reduced value of Sukkot, you get 126, which corresponds to January 26. Or you could even write them out. Maybe it's clearer that way if you write 10th day, or 10th month, 8th day. First month, 26th day. And if you look on our Excel spreadsheet, that's the exact same day. January 26 is Tevet 8, is great 8th day. Isn't that something? And let's see, brother G44 just sent me a message. He said that from the ring eclipse in October to January 26 is 104 days. Now remember, we were discussing the number 104 and how the enemy is telegraphing that number in so many ways in the past few months. Let's see, 10/14/23 was when the ring eclipse happened. That would take us to January 26th. Yeah, 104 days indeed. So maybe that has something to do also with why they were telegraphing the number 104, because I know that the ring eclipse was a huge, huge deal for them. They were telegraphing that all over the place, and for decades, really, going back. And I made a whole bunch of Twitter threads about that. Anyway, so guys, that's where we are. Got a couple of reasonably high watch dates ahead of us on the 25th and 26th of January. I guess that's Thursday and Friday, if this is accurate here. And that's 7th and 8th of Tevet, which corresponds to the 7th and 8th days of Sukkot. So I don't know how it would go down, if it would be like in the West, like the Americas, it would be the 25th of January, and in the East, like Japan and Australia, it would be the 26th of January, perhaps. Or it could just simply be that it waits until, even in the Americas, it's the 26th of January. I don't really know for sure, but these days look like pretty good watch days based on the stuff we've looked at today and in the last video. And yeah, we'll see. But these are just guesses. So, if the 26th passes and we're not raptured, don't be too upset. We all know how close we are. We've seen far too many signs, like the child asteroid, and the wedding ring eclipse was huge. And the 276 sign, that sort of seals the deal, right? That's like the exit sign. When that happened at the end of 2023, the way I look at it is the anchor was dropped at that point, And, once the anchor is dropped, the ship might keep floating forward, but it can only float forward so far. And, we're floating forward still because we're still moving day by day in the year 2024, but not much longer. Eventually we're gonna stop and we're gonna get raptured. So yeah, just remain hopeful and keep looking up. Thank you for sticking it out to the end of the video, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you were blessed by it. And if you guys have any good information, or you want to ask me a question, just drop it in the comments section. Anyway, thanks again, and God bless.